Good afternoon and welcome to the regular meeting of the Public Health and Safety Committee for October 25th, 2023. I am Latricia Vital and I am the chair of this committee. At this time, I will ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify a quorum.
Councilmember Wansley is absent. Rainville.
Present.
Ellison.
Here.
Palmisano is absent. Vice Chair Payne.
Present.
Chair Vital.
Present.
There are 4 members present.
Let the record reflect that we do have a quorum. With that, the agenda for today's meeting is before us. There are 4 items on today's consent agenda. Item 1 is accepting a grant from the U.S. Department of Justice for addressing hate crimes. Item 2 is accepting a grant from the Department of Energy for the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. Item 3 is accepting a grant from the Public Health Regenerative Leadership Synergy for a 1-year leadership training program. And item 4 is adopting an ash tree treatment policy. Is there any discussion on these items? Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you. Not looking to pull an item, but did just want to speak really quickly on the ash tree treatment policy. Want to thank a lot of community members who helped out with this. A number of years ago, we had some former council members who had, I think with really great intention and a lot of information, write a resolution that said, hey, look, we shouldn't be using pesticides at all. And it passed, as you would expect, and it's been in effect. And I think one of the unintended consequences of that policy was that the city's forestry, along with the park board, have been kind of decimating the north side tree canopy without any regard for how we might sort of maintain that resilience on the north side. And so this policy is not an endorsement of using pesticides, but it gives more guidance on how to equip folks who might be in need of tree removal. And it lets them know what their options are in terms of treatment or removal or those types of things. There's lots of specifics about the types of things that can be used. Obviously, they can't hurt pollinators. Obviously, a lot of those things are laid out in the policy. But I think it's also really important to name something I haven't named yet, which is that these tree removals can have a tremendous cost burden on homeowners when they are impacted. I've had constituents who have been charged with as much as $33,000 assessed to their property because of these removals. We've seen a single tree assessment come out, over $7,000 in some instances. And so environmental justice and climate justice is not only about, making sure that we that we're mindful of what we're doing with our lived environment, but it's also about knowing how these policies impact communities of color who have always been impacted. And in the case of North Minneapolis, we deserve a healthy tree canopy. People deserve to understand what the cost of tree removal is. They deserve to understand what their options are in terms of tree removal versus tree treatment. And they deserve relief when the cost burden is too high. So these are the things that we're looking to address. And the resolution, I have it here, but it's long, and I'm sure people don't want to hear me drone on about it. And so it's posted, it's public. We had a lot of feedback from a host of community members as well as experts on this topic to help draft this resolution. So. That's all I wanted to say about it, and so I wanted to just thank everybody, and I hope that all my colleagues will support this policy.
Thank you, Councilmember Ellison. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not here today to question the devastation of emerald ash borer and its very disproportionate impact on our green zones and other parts of our city. We need to reestablish a tree canopy as soon as possible. And this isn't something that we can accomplish quickly. I agree with everything that Councilmember Ellison just said. And this kind of work is done over time. I also understand in conversations with Councilmember Ellison and his staff that the purpose of this resolution is to provide education and options. So to that end, I do have a couple of questions for city staff. And I was wondering, is it okay if we just pull this off and we can go through the whatever your pleasure is, Madam Chair.
We can just have staff answer the questions.
Okay, I do have a few questions, if that's all right, for city staff.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I know these women as Sydney Schaaf and Kelly Molman. Thank you for all your work on trees and all the work that you do in the city. There is a large amount of scientific research on systemic insecticide injections, and they don't all come to the same conclusion. Can you share a little bit about what kind of research and what agencies support the use of insecticides in treating emerald ash borer?
You want me to start? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chair, Council Member. Again, my name is Kelly Molman, Manager of Environmental Programs in the Minneapolis Health Department. So our team are not experts on the use of pesticides. We have looked at some information from the Department of Agriculture at the state. They do provide some information on the best practices for applying and what types of insecticides and not using neonicotinoid, I can't say the word, you know what I'm trying to say, that do affect pollinators, and that when applied appropriately by licensed contractors, and they do license individuals at the state, we would never recommend that anyone use somebody who was not licensed, that there are ways that can prevent some of the worst harms to pollinators and more broadly our ecosystems.
Mm-hmm. And does that insecticide treatment of an ash tree, and I've had my oak trees treated myself with injections, but does it actually save it, or does it just delay its demise?
My understanding is that it delays it. So our understanding is that the majority of ash trees have been infected, and a lightly infected ash tree may be able to be treated and prolong its life, and that, kind of speaking to Councilmember Ellison's point, can help buy time to come up with a financial strategy for the long-term solution of the removal and replacement of that tree.
Mm-hmm. The cost of multiple insecticide injections over time adds up to, I know. So super importantly, and in concert with a different resolution I did about pollinator-friendly things, this does feel in direct contradiction to that. I think that the use of these kinds of insecticides impacts our pollinators, but again, I think different institutions have come to different conclusions. Have you come to a conclusion, I guess, about how these kinds of tree treatments infect pollinators in our communities?
Yes, and I also just wanted to add to what Kelly said, that we did consult the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, the DNR, the University of Minnesota Extension, the Tree Advisory Commission, while we were developing this resolution. The research from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, their review concluded that insecticides commonly used to control EAB are not likely to result in unreasonable risks to human health or the environment when used according to label instructions. And we also did add into the resolution that we only recommend a non-neonicotinoid trunk-ingested pesticide because that poses the least amount of risk to non-target organisms.
Okay. I don't want to, we have other things here on this agenda today. There's a couple of other maybe clauses that I would love for the author to help consider adding to it, because this is meant to be an educational document. So I think that I will abstain and then work offline with the author and see if he's willing to take some of those clauses and have something then to bring in, maybe a modified version that we both could agree on to pass that, if that works for you. It sounds like it does.
Yeah, it works for me.
Thank you. I'm good.
Thank
you for your help, and thank you. I mean, I was surprised to learn at the number of agencies that you reached out to during development of this, so I appreciate your diligence on all of that.
Thank you. Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Vital. First, I just want to have clerks recognize I'm here. And also, I just wanted to speak to item number 1, which is the Matthew Shepard and Jamesburg hate crimes grant, especially in light of the past several weeks where we had lengthy conversations about the impacts of another grant we were considering tied to the Counter Violence Extremism Program, where we talked about wanting to see the city seriously approach the increases of hate crimes across our respective communities. So it's really good to see this grant on today's agenda that does exactly that, that focuses awareness around that. I know that's been an area of weakness that we're trying to develop to amongst our various departments, and just recognizing the uptick of very clear hate crimes that have targeted places of worship, that have targeted our trans residents, a whole host of our residents that occupy various identities that have been marginalized. So I'm really, really proud of staff for bringing forward this in light of the prior grant, and really showing the public that we're taking this work very serious. So I just wanted to make comments on that one.
Thank you, Councilmember Wansley. And seeing no further discussion, I'll move approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I'd like to abstain on item number 4 and aye on the rest.
Thank you. That carries, and the consent agenda will be moved to the full council, and I am confident that Councilmembers Palmisano and Ellison will work out the resolution, work out some language for the resolution. The next item is receiving and filing a presentation on the work of the Community Commission on Police Oversight. Here to present on this item is Director John Jefferson from the Civil Rights Department. Welcome, Director.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson and council members. The CCPO was established May 16th of 2023. I would like to give you updates on the progress of the CCPO. I'd like to speak on the training, case panels, public meetings and guest speakers, community collaboration, NACO and OPCR staff support. Some of the CCPO training that we have established that is required, they've taken Ethics and Conflicts of Interest, Minnesota Government Practice Act.
I'm just trying to put in a presentation.
Oh.
However that works.
Okay. Open meeting law, and we're currently have the use of force training established for November 1st, 2023. We're also in discussions with the director of the REIB to establish the training for REIB. The director is new to the city of Minneapolis, and so we're in the process of establishing that training. Additional training we've also given to the CCPO is orientation training. The first day that the CCPO met, we just gave them a brief overview of the OPCR and also the history of the committees. Some more training that we provided for the CCPO to ensure that they would be prepared to review panels is preponderance of evidence, disciplinary matrix training, and case panel training. The training was conducted usually via Teams or in person. Training was usually hosted by the OPCR staff person or facilitated by OPCR staff personnel or the city's attorney's office. Each training module took approximately 2 to 3 hours. So the CCPO members, commissioners really gave a lot of themselves to put that much into training. We have completed approximately a total of 18 hours of training for the CCPO. Once again, we have use of force training established this month on November 1st at the Public Service Center. Other additional training that's we're going to be establishing is NACO training. Some of the things that we're looking to do is to further the CCPO's training through webinar, the NACO webinar. It'll be Civilian Oversight Training 101, using Police Commission to achieve accountability and understanding the use of force. The NACO is having a conference next month, November 16th through the 23rd, and we have invited the chairperson and vice chairperson to attend that training in Chicago, Illinois. CCPO public meetings. We've had 6 public meetings. We have, I think they're in the ordinance, we're supposed to have 8 a year. So right now we've had 6 public meetings. The chairperson and myself, we usually get together several weeks out to put together the agenda. Our public meetings usually consist of training sometimes and sometimes guest speakers, or a combination of both. Some of the past guest speakers have been MPD Police Chief Brian O'Hara, speaking on the MDHR settlement agreement, City Clerk Casey Carl, speaking on subcommittees and also work groups, DOJ representatives speaking on the consent decree, and also Global Rights for Women speaking on domestic violence. CCPO research. We have established work groups. We thought initially we could have subcommittees, but according to the ordinance, we were not allowed to have subcommittees. So Mr. Casey Carl came up with, hey, we could have work groups. So we established work groups, and we established the community engagement work group, policy and recommendations, and also the governance work group for the CCPO. CCPO panels. We've given the CCPO members or commissioners comprehensive training on reviewing cases. That consists of reviewing evidence, BWC footage, and also documents, reviewing interviews, statements, and understanding the preponderance of evidence and how to apply the preponderance of evidence when they're looking at cases. Also, we established that one of the most important things when looking at cases is to consider the totality of circumstances of the case based on the facts of the case, to be able to read the summary and to establish that. Additional training was also given on the MPD discipline matrix as well. Commissioners, when it comes to the panels, commissioners are given in advance 10 calendar days to review the case files. The entire case file is ready for review and sent via a secure link for the commissioners to review. Extended time is sometimes granted and planned for review of larger cases and more complex cases. Currently, we've had 2 panels, and we're looking to have more in the future. The review panels consist of 3 civilians and 2 law enforcement personnel with the rank of sergeant and above. Panelists review full case files and materials in advance. Once again, the preponderant evidence is the gold standard that they're using to look at cases. Panelists issue recommendations of merit, no merit, or remand for further information on allegations, as well as recommendations for discipline. The complete panel decision is added to the case, and that is sent to the chief of police for review. In essence, in review for the CCPO, we've had 6 public meetings, 18 hours of modular training. We're currently collaborating with the UCMT to further community engagement, and we're continuing to train through NACO as well. OPCR staff have supported the CCPO through research and study and have been supporting a supporting mechanism for the chair and chairperson. Questions?
Thank you for the presentation, and it looks like we do have some. Vice Chair Payne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It looks like a lot of the focus of the work of CCPO has been around training and getting all of our new members up to speed. I'm curious we have officers in the field right now interacting with the community. I've already had, just in the last 2 weeks, 2 pretty negative interactions that have been reported to my office by way of constituents. And I forwarded some of those complaints to the police chief, and he's had, internal investigations looking into it. But I'm curious, what role has CCPO played to date on any of these current things that are unfolding, especially knowing that they're getting up to speed?
Well, I can't comment on what you're talking about specifically, but what the CCPO is establishing, we're trying to establish more panels. We're trying to establish panels where we can look at more cases. We are in the process of pushing more cases out to establish them looking at panels and to push that information back to the chief, whether it's merit or no merit.
Have we had any of those panels formed yet?
Yes, we've had 2 panels so far. We're in the process. We've had 2 panels, and that information has been pushed. The results have been pushed to the police chief already. We're looking to have 2 more panels. We have cases ready to go right now to pursue more panels.
And then remind me again, for each of the panels, is it a new panel established per incident, or how are we forming these panels, and how many cases is each panel reviewing?
So each panel is reviewing at least 2 cases. So what we're trying to do, we try to push out in advance. We have a poll that we send out to the CCPO and also the law enforcement personnel to establish the timelines that when we're going to have these panels. So we try to send that out 2 weeks in advance to set up these panels. We find out who is available from the CCPO and from the law enforcement personnel, and from there we set up the panels accordingly.
And have we seen kind of what the timeline is for once the panel meets to review a case, how long it might take to come to some determination? Have we seen enough reviews so far to kind of get a sense of what that timeline looks like from start to finish?
So from the time they received the information, they look through the information. We set up the panel time. They're looking at the information. I believe that is like an exact time frame. I know there is a number that we wanted to follow. So we're looking at least 7 days for them to review this information and to get back with us.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Vita. Thank you, staff, for the presentation. I know the CCPO is something that many of our residents are paying close attention to because it was held up as a key example of how the city is making, serious and meaningful changes to police oversight. I do know there was a number of council members, including myself, that did want to delay the creation of the CCPO almost a year ago to make sure that we were doing everything possible to set it up amongst the strongest foundation possible, and making sure that there was a due diligence of incorporating community input. But nevertheless, I do know some of the reasons why, we moved forward with this process was, wanted to make sure that we were being responsive to the coming Minnesota Department of Human Rights consent decree, and wanted to show that we were taking that work serious. But I do want to note that since the CCPO has been up and running for almost a year now, my office has received some feedback that I would say is concerning that, are we following some of the same trends that we did with the prior oversight body that made it impossible for them to do their jobs effectively, and making sure we're not replicating those same things. So for me, I really want to ask a couple of questions just to get some clarity on, what are some concrete next steps that this body can do, and working in collaboration with staff to make sure that CCPO is not only doing that necessary but also meaningful work of oversight, but also doing so in a way that strengthens, not weakens, that public trust that we're trying to rebuild, and also, invites that participation that is needed to make this work effective. So that said, my first question is, I know the OPCR data dashboard shows the number of complaints filed per year. I believe between 2016 and 2022, the number ranged from 370 to about 1,200 per year. For 2023, I believe the number that was reported on the dashboard is 32. So I just wanted to confirm, is this number accurate of where we're at currently today as of November?
The problem with the dashboard right now is that we have a new system called Axon. So what we're trying to do, I'm not an IT specialist, but we are working very well with IT, and the problem is extracting that information out of Axon to keep everything updated. And right now, we're in the process, and actually we're speaking with Axon this week, to speed up this process. We are behind in those numbers. The problem is trying to extract the information out of Axon, and we're in the production of trying to create that system to make it work. I guess I'm not an IT specialist, like I said, but it's all about mapping that information out of Axon to put onto the dashboards. So that is the biggest hiccup right now. We have this new system. We thought we'd be ready to go, but Axon is very difficult. Like I said, I'm not an IT specialist, but the main thing is being able to extract that information from Axon and put up on the dashboard so those to reflect the numbers correctly.
So you're, I guess, guesstimating that we're probably above 32 or under 30, kind of where we're at now.
I don't have that exact number, so I don't want to say the wrong number and falsify a number. But the problem is that it's extracting the information out of that in order to keep the numbers up to par.
Okay. Well, whenever you're able to extract a more accurate list, it would be good to know, because I wasn't sure if even the figure that was reported, if that's even part of like a backlog too, or if you all are also working through a backlog. So it'd be good to,
Sure.
know those things.
Thank you.
And then I wanted to also know, similar to Councilmember Payne's question around just like talking me through the complaint process, particularly when it comes from the public or from, let's say, an officer reporting another officer, like a flow chart of communications, even the Unity mediation team, which from my understanding, they're also setting up clinics across the city. So just wanting to know what the process is and kind of like how that relates to discipline being, made.
So yes, we are working in hand with the UCMT right now. We are they're setting up different establishments throughout the city for people to take complaints. We can receive complaints several different ways. Online, that's the preferred way. That information comes in to us. We look at those complaints. We establish if the complaints, to verify the complaints. If there's something in the complaint that we believe or not believe, there's violations or allegations that we need to address, we'll address those complaints. Those complaints are looked at. They could be a preliminary investigation, or they can go to a full admin investigation, depending on the information that's given. We've been out with the UCMT, establishing with them the things that they should be looking for to assist people with the complaints and to fill out the forms. We've also, with those complaint forms, are in the process of printing those complaint forms out in different languages. So no matter what the community is, we can address that community. But the most, efficient matter is to go online to fill out those complaints. The UCMT, they do have some computers established so far at their different sites in order for people to come in and sit down and fill out that complaint form. Once we receive that information, stated before, we establish if that information meets certain allegations to move forward in a preliminary investigation or administrative investigation. If it goes to administrative investigation, that information is given to the case investigator to conduct the investigation. Of course, as you know, it's been established that we have 180 calendar days, not work days, to complete that investigation. And we have, through our system, Axon, tracking what the case investigator is doing and what time limited, where the times are at in investigating the case. Once that case is completed, I'll review the case, and that case is set up to go to panel.
Okay, so that's how, and walking back here. But also an officer can also submit, let's say another,
Yes.
do, and then the
I'm
same
sorry if I missed
process
that
will
question,
follow.
yes.
Yes. Oh.
Looks like Director Gillespie has something to add.
To just clarify, Chair Vita, Councilmember Wansley, is that all community complaints come to, based on the settlement agreement that we signed with MDHR, they come to the Civil Rights Division, OPCR. If it's an officer complaint against an officer, it actually goes to IA. So I just wanted to make sure we clarified that. So those complaints no longer come to us.
Okay.
There has been questions, so I'll bring it up now, about any complaints regarding potentially the police chief. Those are not investigated by us as well.
Thank you for providing that clarification. Next question. Can you also share like how many disciplinary actions have been recommended by the CCPO thus far?
One so far.
Okay. And then how many officers have been disciplined this year? Would it still be just that one of
Yes.
officers?
Yeah, I'm not
disciplined this
sure
year?
how many, I don't know how many officers were in that particular case. I can't recall.
Okay, awesome. And then I know, again, going back to the ordinance, I know it specifically requires that the city publish monthly updates. That includes like the status of, complaints. And I know residents have reached out to us saying that no data is being reported on this. So I just wanted to also, know if there's any barriers that's currently existing that like is making that public transparency a little bit challenging to.
The complaint history on police officers has been established. That is up to speed, up to par.
On the
website, yes.
Website, okay.
Right.
And okay, that's good. And around meeting updates too, all of that is up there. Oh.
Thank you, Director Jefferson. Again, Chair Vita, Councilmember Wansley, I just want to make sure we're as clear as possible. The information that you just talked about, it is updated, but it is OPCR information,
Right.
so it does not include information from IA. So that's probably where the community has concern. So we are only able to publish what we own in terms of data, and the data we have control over is OPCR, and so it's up to IA to publish their information. The goal is ultimately to have just the one site for community members. That currently does not exist, and we do have a claimer that says this is just OPCR data, so people know that. So that's probably where some of the concern is from community members. And I'll just stand back here just a minute.
Okay, and that also kind of relates to the challenges that you're working through with IT to try to get that data up more accurate.
The complaint history is up to par. That is working well.
Oh,
It's
okay.
the other data that we're having a problem with. And as Director Gillespie said, that yes, that data on the complaint, on the history of the police officer is OPCR information, does not include IA information.
That's good to know. And then also, I know MPD came to PHS with their last quarterly update and shared, a bunch of policy changes that they have made, which includes some changes to like off-duty work, their discipline matrix, and specifically also the neglect of duty. So I just want to know if the CCPO has also been formally engaged in any of those policy changes, and who from the city is responsible for helping connect them to that work too.
Could you repeat that question one more time?
Yeah,
That was a
so
lot.
MPD, they come to this committee to do quarterly reports. They talked about kind of a wave of policy changes that they have made. I mentioned 3 specific areas: the discipline matrix, neglect of duty, and off duty. But there were many more they referenced. And wanted to know, was CCPO part of helping shape those policies? Because from my understanding, the ordinance says CCPO can also help with the shaping of MPD's policies.
No, they were not.
No, okay. Okay.
Thank you, Director. You and I have had a lot of these conversations,
We-
so I'm glad
Yeah,
you're
so-
here answering questions.
And some of these I know that Director Jefferson may not have even been present for, and particularly like the discipline matrix. So the discipline matrix, that happened even before the CCPO was established, so they wouldn't have been involved in that. So it is potentially some of the other policies that you talked about were in the work before there was a CCPO. And the CCPO hasn't been around a year. It's just been since May. So all the work that you've seen, the trainings that have happened, that's the work that has gone into the CCPO since they were established and took the oath of office. And I think it was May that they took the
May
oath.
16th.
Yes, May 16th. Thank you for that. And so some of those policies, those changes were in the works before there was a CCPO, but that information should come to us. We work with the city attorney's office. There is a smart sheet that we have that gets updated, and so that they will have a voice in policy changes, because I know in the ordinance that it's stated. So
And do you know if they will? I know at least MPD framed the discipline matrix is kind of a live document. Like they're going to be adding to that as like their core kind of policy guiding discipline. Is that one where you all will, or the CCPO will likely review and also continue to like weigh in on?
I think it probably will be something they may review, they may have an opportunity to weigh in on, but we would work with the CCPO chair to make that determination, so it's not a decision that we would make for them.
Okay. I will know, there's lots of questions that I had. I know there's been also an email that all council members received that also flagged some very concerning dynamics that definitely want to follow up with staff about to see how we can swiftly address them. I know one specific was even around, again, public transparency, which some of these things seem like they could be easily fixable with like proactive communication or over communicating things, but did want to flag like definitely plan to follow up on those meetings or at least that email to get some more context of, you know, how we can improve public transparency, even like being able to let folks know we have these PHS meetings where we do get updates from you all and being able to like let them know those things. So thank you for providing as much as you could today, information.
Thank you, Councilmember Owens. Chair Vita, I just really want to say this because you did bring up the issue of trust. There is just mistrust for anything that is around police and policies. And so that's a part of the challenge that we have to deal with as staff. And I'm not saying public doesn't have a reason to feel that way, but we know it exists. And so a lot of times we are getting information out, but not to the public satisfaction. We get that because they are wondering what's happening behind the scenes. But what I will say, the majority of the commissioners have just been really phenomenal. And so I'm really excited about this body and the work that they're doing and the commitment that they've made from a time standpoint. And one of the reasons we put ourselves on this agenda, and we talked to Chair Vito about this, is because we do want to find every avenue possible to share information. And we know that the clerk sends this out so people will then know that we are presenting. And so we are going to continue having these public conversations, having partnerships with people, finding ways to provide information. It may not be to the satisfaction of everyone, but I just want to say that we're definitely going to do our part to make sure that we are being as transparent as possible.
Awesome, and look forward to following up with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Gillespie, Director Jefferson, I just want to say thank you for all your hard work, your smart work. I know this is new, it's a startup, and you're trying very, very hard. I see the success, and hang in there and keep working hard because your work is appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And I have to commend the commissioners. They've really dedicated a lot of time to the training and also to the public meetings.
Thank you. And I just also wanted to add, Director Jefferson and Gillespie, thank you so much for this work. You know, I know it didn't start out easy. It's going to be hard to please everyone, but I really commend the work you all are doing and the trainings you've provided for the commissioners. I've heard feedback from folks who sit on this committee that they really appreciate how well prepared they're feeling with folks like the chief coming in and you all setting the tone for what the work is and kind of getting rid of some of the confusion about what is allowed on this commission. And I think that's good. You know, there was some confusion on the role of this commission and what kind of decisions commissioners could make. So thank you so much for making sure I think it's only been 6 months that the commission has been meeting. And so I've heard feedback from several of the commissioners around how well they feel in the space, the engagement from staff, from community members, the transparency and how it feels different than other commissions. And so thank you all for the continued work. Of course, you know, I'm here to support however I can to make sure that this is successful. You did a great job at starting out with the model that was different than anything we had ever done, and having a precedented amount of folks apply to be on this commission. And so I want us to continue in that work, making sure that people stay interested and feel like they're coming to do some work. Most of the commissioners I spoke with have said to me that they feel like they're adding something to the city. They feel valued on this commission. They really look forward to coming to these meetings to see what the next presentations are, and they have an open line of communication with staff if they need questions answered or anything cleared up. So thank you for that, and thank you for supporting this community and making sure we get that done. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate the presentation too. As Director Gillespie said, this was been a conversation we've had, that these presentations will be public so that there is a level of transparency and the community at large understands what's going on in these meetings. Even though they're public now, you could watch the meetings, they're on the YouTube channel, but just, so we can make sure that folks know what's happening in these meetings. So thank you for the presentation as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, and I will direct the clerk to please receive and file that report. The next item is receiving and filing a response to a legislative directive on municipal strategies and programs related to the prevention and deterrence of auto theft. Here to present on this item is Andrew Hawkins from the City Auditor's Office. Welcome, Mr. Hawkins. And I will also note that Councilmember Koski is joining us and brought this legislative directive forward. Welcome, Councilmember Koski.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Vita, members of the Public Health and Safety Committee. My name is Andrew Hawkins. I manage the City Auditor's Policy and Research Division. I'm here today to present our report on the strategies to deter and prevent auto theft within the city of Minneapolis. I will be joined today by one of our newest additions to the Policy and Research Group, Sarah Renner, and we're looking forward to sharing our work with you today. A quick introduction, just to give the timeline of this request. On 9/27, PHS requested that an analysis of auto theft deterrent strategies be completed by our division. On 10/5, this was approved by the City Council, which kind of allows our work to formally commence. It's at that point that we can begin engaging with external parties, and we can kind of fully dedicate all those resources that are allocated to Council to kind of dictate how they're best used for research. So again, that was on 10/5. On 10/25, which brings us to today, that was the requested date for report delivery and presentation. The reason I kind of wanted to capture this is I think it's a good opportunity just to show, how much can come out of a very short period of time. There was a lot that went into this in a short window, and I think we're both very proud of how quickly we were able to turn something around that hopefully can be beneficial and lead to additional discussions going forward. The scope of the analysis conducted, we reviewed numerous Minnesota agencies to compare tactics, equipment, programs, resourcing, just to kind of see how they were approaching rising auto thefts in terms of both deterrence, recovery, any aspects of prosecution at the county level in terms of both juveniles and adults. In addition to this, we also met with members, and sorry, I'm going to go through a long list, but the Minneapolis Police Department, Hennepin County Sheriff's Department, Ramsey County Sheriff's Department, Hennepin County Attorney's Office, Ramsey County Attorney's Office, Minnesota Department of Commerce, University of Minnesota, and some representatives from StarChase, which is a GPS tracking technology that's being rolled out across some jurisdictions in Minnesota, as well as nationally. The overview kind of on the issue itself, again, this stemmed from an initial review that we had done that showed the disparity in what we were seeing across the Twin Cities. St. Paul had seen a 41% decrease from the previous year in auto thefts, while Minneapolis had seen a 77% increase. Obviously, again, knowing that the cities do mirror each other in a lot of ways, the fact that there was such a disparity did kind of stand out. And I think that was something that was definitely worth looking into, so that was sort of how we got to here. According to Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension data, as of October 20th, Minneapolis surpassed the prior year's numbers with over 6,400 auto thefts. Nationwide, vehicle thefts have increased 34% during the first half of 2023 when compared to the same time in the previous year. And of the 32 cities studied by the U.S. Council on Criminal Justice, Minneapolis had the 8th largest rate increase, while St. Paul saw the biggest drop with that 41%. Now getting into our next section, that'll be policies, tactics, and equipment. Looking at tactics, starting off with Minneapolis in terms of what are we doing right now as far as both deterrence and recovery of vehicles. The primary program in the city of Minneapolis is the bait car program. This includes multiple vehicles that are deployed in areas around the city. The way that those areas are determined, the strategic analysis group within MPD is able to essentially kind of heat map the city and figure out where some of these things are occurring, and so that way they can place those cars in areas that they think that, that there is the most activity and they're the most likely to receive attention. From July 22 to June 23, there were 64 vehicles stolen, 71 arrests, and 68 individuals charged. Again, it's one of those where, while those numbers might not seem high in comparison to the overall thefts, I think the one thing that does stand out with the BAIT program, which is pretty unique to Minneapolis, is that its clearance rate's incredibly high. The reason shouldn't come as a huge surprise. The BAIT cars are equipped with audio and video recording devices. One of the hardest, I think the most frustrating components that we found and heard in this process is being able to identify who's stolen a vehicle. In the event that they come across it and it's been abandoned, a lot of times individuals are wearing masks or gloves and they're not able to recover enough to formulate any charge. So with the BAIT car program, they have the individuals in the vehicle. Everything's recorded, audio's recorded. A lot of times they'll hear intent being expressed while they're driving the vehicle. So I think that was something that was noted to us from a couple different places, is that the clearance rate from the BAIT car program was something that they were proud of. The other piece is the automated license plate reader. There was a single unit. There is a single dedicated staff. We'll get to that in the next section. But for auto theft, I believe it's an unmarked. Squad has an automated license plate reader that they received as part of the state grant. And they had noted that in under a 2-year period, just from essentially driving between BAIT car setup locations and to and from the precinct, they were able to turn that on, and just from that itself, were able to recover 405, or identify 405 stolen vehicles that had been parked along the street for recovery. Moving over to Hennepin County, something to note when we're looking at the county level is that if you call in an auto theft, it's a responsibility, initial, as far as being reported, of the city itself. So if there's a municipal law enforcement agency, they're the ones that would cover that. There are some places Hennepin County covers that don't have their own law enforcement agencies. So I believe Greenwood, Golden Valley, and then there's a couple little small, like HCMC property, where they would be the responsible party for the initial call of a report of a vehicle being stolen. If they see anything or come across it just in their their day-to-day work, they will respond. However, that one of the primary things that they noted their investigations were looking at are VIN switches, which are being done with vehicles that are frequently stolen out of state, brought into Minnesota, and then registered under false documentation, and then sold to people who are unaware they've bought a stolen vehicle until eventually it's pulled over, somebody runs the VIN, and they identify that this was taken out of, again, either another area in Minnesota, Cook County, in Illinois, or somewhere else. They also, similar to what I had mentioned in MPD, do utilize the automated license plate readers. For Ramsey County, that one, again, the focus was on the CAT team. This is, again, a specific unit that's been created by Ramsey County. They focus on its real-time information. They're allowed to intervene, and often, again, before crimes occurred. So if they're able to discern that there's going to be, vehicles stolen, they'll have individuals that are there that can, box in a vehicle when it arrives for everybody to get out and get in the suspect. Again, the vehicle that they believe is supposed to be, about to be stolen. And then that's where the whole element of surprise boxing in vehicles with unmarked squad comes in. And then the other thing that they noted was just arresting and booking everyone when stopping a stolen car, including youth, which is something that's not necessarily done across the board in Minnesota or nationally. Also, too, I know this is going to be a lot of material. If anybody has any questions, feel free to stop me at any point, and I'm happy to answer. So looking at pursuit policies, there are some differences between Minneapolis, Hennepin, St. Paul, and Ramsey County. I think the easiest way to compare it is to look at Minneapolis and St. Paul. That's fairly similar. The biggest difference is the language in the St. Paul policy is similar to what Minneapolis had previously been before a recent change, which was that the individual has to have committed or is about to commit a violent felony. Minneapolis has changed, from violent felony to violent pursuit offense, which I think included armed carjacking. I believe it was targeted kind of around the auto theft area, but that was, again, some languages changed, while seemingly small could be bigger. But then the other piece that they have in common is in the event that they observe any individual that's driving recklessly to a point that allowing them to continue to operate their vehicle in that manner would be a danger to public safety. And going from them to Hennepin or Ramsey County, both the county sheriffs have a pretty broad and unrestrictive policy as far as pursuits. Obviously, like they're allowed to pursue stolen vehicles. If they identify a vehicle driving erratically, if they identify a vehicle that was on this, matches the description of one that was involved in a previous offense. So I think that's somewhere where there is a pretty broad difference between both the police departments and the county sheriff in terms of, just what they're actually able to do with a chase. One of the other policy items that I did want to note too is their ability to make vehicle contact. I think both sheriffs have versions of, again, the individuals need to be trained, but of the PIT maneuver, and then I believe there's another one, it's, I think it's VIT, so VIT, it's like vehicle interdiction technique, I believe is a term. So I think they're both authorized to conduct those, whereas Minneapolis and St. Paul are not and have fairly restrictive language because it's considered a use of deadly force to make contact with your vehicle with another vehicle. So there's a very clear set of restrictions that, or guidelines that that an officer would need to meet before they're able to do that. In terms of looking at equipment across all these jurisdictions and nationally, stop sticks are still a very common one that we see. I did include pictures just since I know not everybody knows what everything always looks like. The one you see in the top left, that's a stop stick patrol terminator. That's employed by a lot of, sorry, I didn't make the names. That's employed by a number of departments around the country. They're essentially a smaller, more portable version of what we kind of know as the traditional spike strips or stingers. A lot of times, when an officer makes a stop, they can approach the vehicle and set it down behind the vehicle's tires. If the vehicle backs up over it, it'll puncture the vehicle's tires, and with the goal being that it disables the vehicle in the event that they do flee. Down on the bottom left, you'll see essentially a more, I guess, modern version of what we know as the traditional spike strips. That's the stop stick itself, and so they fold up. They can be kept in the rear of a vehicle. In the past, and not even in the past, I think they still are quite a few of them in operation, but they almost are, they fold up accordion style and they can go and slide them out into the road. We've seen a lot of agencies and we actually did hear from a number of individuals that they're going away from these just because there's been, I think just with increased data, there's a lot of issues with their deployment in terms of I think the unintended consequences. It puts the officers a lot closer to the incident and puts them in, I think a dangerous situation. There have been a number of officer deaths over the past several years. It can endanger people that are nearby, just from either the vehicle swerving around it or the vehicle driving over it, puncturing its tires, spinning, and subsequently running into somebody else. Top right is just one example. It's an automated license reader. That's the Axon Fleet 3. These can be squad mounted, so they can be either in any part of the windows, they can be on the light bar, they can be on the bumper bar, rear bumper. It kind of depends on the agency you're looking at as far as where they have them positioned so that, and what they're trying to do. The bottom right, that's a fixed or portable mounted automated license plate reader. So a lot of times they'll have a solar panel next to them that powers them. You can see these a lot in mall parking lots in a number of places, but oftentimes they're either permanently fixed to a street post or a stoplight, or they can be attached to kind of the same as like the speed cameras that are movable. They can move them based on heat mapping and locations. So those are some of the things that we did come across. The next one is the Star Chase GPS tracking system. We came across this one because the Department of Commerce Auto Theft Prevention Grant was sort of at the center of a lot of these law enforcement agencies that are building out their auto theft response approaches, and this was something that we'd seen adopted by Ramsey County, Maplewood, Edina, Oakdale, Woodbury. I think there's about 8 or 9 cities that have started to explore this technology and having it installed in the squads. They also have a handheld deployment system that I believe is used for like DUI checkpoints and things of that nature, but I don't think we've come across any that have gone that route yet. It's just the squad mounted. So you can see just in the pictures, this is what it looks like. The top left photo is when it's closed, just on the grill of a squad car. On the right, you can see that's where it's actually open. Kind of the yellow Vaseline-looking stuff is what actually heats up, and that's the adhesive piece. So when they turn the unit on, it'll warm it up to the based on the outside air temperature to the temperature that it's best suited to stick to the vehicle it's going to be launched at. The bottom left, you actually see, and bottom right, you'll actually see what it looks like when it's attached. The head of this deployment system, it's almost aside from the adhesive piece, it's almost a Nerf type component, so it's soft. So when it hits, it's supposed to spread it out so that it has the best chance of sticking on the vehicle. It can be deployed in normal conditions from 18 to 20 feet, which the way that it was, I think, framed with us was if you put the front of your vehicle essentially up to like where you can see the back tires of the car in front of you. It can be deployed, immediately, and then once it's deployed, the idea is that the officer's vehicle will move back and they'll be able to follow from a safe distance while that vehicle is monitored just via GPS. They can also do a number of partnership agreements between jurisdictions. So if Hennepin County and Ramsey County and Minneapolis and St. Paul all have this, they're able to share data and see where everything's at in real time. GPS tracking is obviously, again, a fairly touchy issue around law enforcement for very obvious reasons. One of the things that was noted with this is it does have, I can't remember if it's approval or recommendation from the ACLU, and that's based on the fact that, again, the battery is intended to last 8 to 10 hours, so this isn't something where it's on a vehicle in perpetuity and you can pull it up 8 months down the road because you're interested in what that vehicle's up to. And also because I think the deployment speed is 27 miles an hour, I think was the maximum, which is substantially less than, I think when we think of these, it's very understandable based on what they look like that, the comparison to less than lethal projectiles is going to be made. So this is being launched at a far lower speed than any of those would be, and then it does have that soft front on it. All right. Next, we're going to move into the staff resourcing section of our presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Sarah Renner.
Welcome.
Thank you. Same rule applies. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt. I'm going to talk to you about staff resources for addressing auto theft. So this is something we saw increasingly across agencies within the metro area, but also beyond, that staff are dedicated, more staff are being hired that are actually dedicated to auto theft, meaning they're full-time, they only work on auto theft, and they do not have to respond to other non-auto theft related matters. And it was explained to us, it was elaborated that this is important because among other crimes, even among property crimes, auto theft rarely gets priority. So that's the reason for the emphasis on dedicated auto theft staff. And key roles include data analysis, patrol, investigation, and prosecution. But I wanted to mention that this is not exclusive. Ramsey, for example, has used grant funding to hire community outreach, restorative justice, and mental health specialists that all focus on auto theft. And yes, so most of the staff in the Twin Cities area that are dedicated to auto theft are funded by this Auto Theft Prevention Program grant that is administered by the Minnesota Department of Commerce. In July this year, the MPD received $665,000 from the grant to fund operations through 2025, and I believe that came through this committee. And that grant is primarily used for staffing and equipment in agencies across the state. So, and when we're breaking down the actual capacity then, looking comparatively across the counties and cities, we see data analytics capacity, meaning how many auto theft analysts are there. Again, dedicated analysts looking at auto theft. And just to say for perspective that those are people who look for trends, identifying hotspots, so that informs where you're patrolling, where to position bait cars. They can also assist investigators to try to make charges stick. So in Minneapolis, there are no dedicated auto theft analysts, although we just wanted to note there is a strategic data analysis team in the MPD. Hennepin County Sheriff's Office has 5 auto theft analysts. St. Paul has 1. Ramsey County has 3 to 5. Looking at patrol and investigative capacity, in Minneapolis, as I think Andrew noted, there is 1 dedicated auto theft officer who is patrol. He's actually administering the bait car program. In Hennepin County, there are 2 auto theft investigators. And in St. Paul, there are also 2 dedicated auto theft investigators. Ramsey County has an additional 2 to 3 because they just, with their most recent grant, they hired a 3rd investigator, I believe, are in the process of doing so. They also have 6 to 7. This is a team of about 8 to 10. So it depends on how staffed up they are, but potentially 10 people are in the Ramsey County Sheriff Office CAT team. And including, and among them are about 6 to 7 deputies that do patrolling only for auto theft. Yeah, so then looking at the next one, just to point out also on the prosecution side, the Hennepin County, so the Hennepin County Attorney's Office has one dedicated auto theft prosecutor. Ramsey County has 2. Specifically, they just hired one to focus on juvenile prosecution. And I should say that also Ramsey County emphasized quite a lot that the investigators and the prosecutors were working together to make cases, because it's quite difficult, as Andrew mentioned, to make cases of the actual, that establishes that a person stole the vehicle. So when you have the investigation team, the analysts, and the prosecutor sort of building that case together, it was explained to us by the Ramsey County Attorney's Office that that was a model that they used that worked well. That's all for staff, and then we wanted to talk about youth service and diversion programs. So youth ages about 13 to 17 have been increasingly responsible for auto theft. Just to substantiate that, around half of the arrests the Ramsey County CAT team made since 2021 are juveniles, so around half. Also in Ramsey County, repeat juvenile auto thefts represented about 40% of all juvenile auto thefts, meaning that many of the juveniles are repeat offenders. They tend to be, it was explained to us, less motivated to monetize stolen cars. They're more likely to use the stolen cars to do things like brag online, but also, unfortunately, to commit other crimes. And yes, and approaching youth offenders and suspects differently. So just to go back to the rationale for youth justice systems and treating youth offenders differently, that has a lot of relevance to how youth auto theft offenders are treated. Youth involvement in the justice system is linked to poor health and education outcomes, reduced future employment, large cost to society. The science around adolescence brains suggests less impulse control and the tendency to react to punitive approaches with defiance rather than behavior change. So studies in youth justice suggest the importance of early intervention, so intervening before they become prolific auto thieves, rapid accountability, so after an incident, limiting the time between the incident and the accountability is important, more important with youth, and also youth diversion. And youth diversion is a broad term, but it generally refers to holding youth accountable in a way that does not involve being charged in juvenile court. And I wanted to point out to a specific kind of youth diversion, because this is used across the Twin Cities, the restorative justice youth diversion. Evidence suggests, including, actually, I should say primarily and boldly from Minneapolis, is the evidence that suggests the efficacy of restorative justice youth diversion. And what that includes, because we'll refer to it, is accountability contracts and practices in which youth learn to take responsibility for their behavior. It involves some type of community review whereby eligible youth who would otherwise face charges have to admit to their actions and agree to take responsibility in a community setting with family or guardians present and often victims as well. There's a dialogue there that promotes the youth's understanding of how their actions impact others. If youth successfully complete the agreed accountability actions, they then avoid charges and do not get a record. If they do not complete the actions, however, they are referred back for traditional processing. So that's how restorative justice youth diversion works. So then looking comparatively at how youth auto theft prevention works, so it was explained to us that despite the spike in auto theft, and this was explained to us by the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, that they were not having, I should say, all youth cases are referred by protocol to the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, but they were not receiving, they told us, cases related to youth auto theft. So therefore, they were not able to prosecute. So the MPD at the same time reported that they largely knew who the young offenders were, but they were not able to make arrests or cases that would stick in juvenile court. So Hennepin County Attorney's Office responded this June by launching the Youth Auto Theft Prevention Initiative, and that's an initiative where law enforcement across the county and at the Hennepin County office they meet, identify suspects that they believe are involved in auto theft, and then they follow up with the families to offer services, family services, so it's for the young person and for the family. Those are voluntary. There is a similar approach that started a bit earlier in Ramsey County. So this started in September 2021, and this is the Ramsey County Youth Auto Theft Initiative Project, which is actually the umbrella project for which the CAT team is a part of that umbrella. Under that project, community navigators contact families of youth, identify it as being involved in auto theft, offering services, and a little bit of a difference there. They have more emphasis on mentoring programs for the young person, including through the African American Leadership Council and other community groups. So they probably are more likely to enroll youth in programs, from what I understand. And they also have the community navigators on staff in the county attorney's office. So they currently have 3. I think they got money to hire another. But our intervention in Hennepin County works through embedded social workers. So that's a difference. Youth diversion. So this is the difference between the last one, which is voluntary services, and this one is that this is after a young person is arrested or cited for a charge related to auto theft. And in Minneapolis, we have the Minneapolis Juvenile Restorative Justice Collaborative, which, the MPD can actually, it includes community-based restorative justice organizations, Minneapolis Public Schools, Hennepin County Attorney's Office, and the juvenile unit of the MPD. And how this works is that the MPD reviews every youth misdemeanor arrest or citation for eligibility and makes referrals accordingly. Again, if successful youth do not get a record or a charge, if they are not successful, they are referred to the county attorney for traditional processing. This is the evidence I referred to. There was a U of M study, it's an evaluation actually, that took place actually from 2014 to 2018, and then they looked again at they looked at misdemeanor charges over that period, and then they looked again at who was rearrested in 2019, and they found that there were about 35% or so of youth arrested who went through the youth diversion, and those who did were 2.5 times less likely to be rearrested compared to those processed traditionally. What's happening most recently, and this is after COVID, or during COVID, after 2020, I should say, there's a decreasing number of youth being referred for youth diversion, and And it was explained to us that that is because the MPD are not making as many misdemeanor arrests, including for auto theft. So there are a lot fewer youth to refer to diversion. The county attorney's office can also refer eligible youth for diversion services, although they emphasize the importance of having diversion through local law enforcement, mostly because of the speed that you have the accountability more quickly in the case that it's the police that are referring directly to diversion in the city. St. Paul also has a restorative justice diversion program that they refer young people to. And Ramsey County has a combination of diversion programs, one specifically focused on youth auto theft offenders. So after an arrest, youth auto theft offenders are enrolled in community accountability and healing programs. And increasingly, they're trying to combine these efforts so that they have this Reimagining Justice for Youth initiative, which is a restorative justice diversion program. And so eligible youth are referred to that process under which they go through a collaborative review. This started last year, by the way, and so it's too soon to see the impacts, but there's been an increasing number referred over the course of the year. Over the last year, 330 youth were referred for a collaborative review, which is the diversion process, including auto theft offenders. And with that, I'll hand back to my colleague, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right, thank you to Sarah. We have a couple more here. We'll cover legislative reform efforts, and then we go into kind of their overview of where there might be some opportunities and what next steps could look like. From a legislative standpoint, we did a review nationally. This just highlights a few of the ones that we had come across in terms of what's being done at the state level to address auto thefts. Basically, what has been happening is either through advocacy or through representatives themselves, constituents. They're kind of going back and looking at some of their whether again statutes, laws, regulations that could be having adverse impacts on this, or time has evolved enough, or the situation's evolved where it might be time to review these for a new approach. A good example in Minnesota, this is not passed yet, it's currently in the House. HF 686, what this does, it creates a very small exemption for the use of tracking devices by law enforcement. It allows them to be specifically used in the case that a car has been reported stolen, and then it has to be removed immediately when the car is recovered, or I believe there was a stipulation in there that it would be up to 24 hours. So that I know that does have a pretty broad range of sponsors behind it, and is expected to continue moving forward. I'm not sure what the timeline would be for passing. As it stands right now, for the municipalities and counties that do employ the GPS tracking technology, there is the requirement to not circumvent, it's just a requirement from the current state law is that the individual whose vehicle has been stolen has to authorize them to use tracking technology in the event they locate their vehicle. So obviously that could continue. I believe if that happens, then they would be allowed to track it for potentially longer than 24 hours, but this carve-out would allow them to do so if they're unable to contact the vehicle's owner. Colorado, this one was fairly interesting. One of the reasons for this change to occur was actually that the way that the state had approached auto theft and the punitive part of it had essentially a disparate impact, and the equity impacts of it across the board weren't necessarily something that I think had been fully considered when they had passed their old law, which based the punishment on the value of the vehicle. So what we saw is that, again, a lot of higher end vehicles weren't being stolen. You had individuals going to other neighborhoods where the cars were, slightly lower value, and generally what you'll see there is they're less likely to have all of the same security systems and everything. So we were seeing, a significant, increase in vehicles being taken from neighborhoods, where I think middle to lower income. New Jersey, one of the items that has just gone through there, essentially it's a version of, I don't want to necessarily compare it to RICO, but it's something similar where it's the targeting auto theft networks. A lot of times this is something we heard from sheriffs and police and county attorneys as well, actually, is that, it's a known group of individuals that are doing this. Generally, there have been many situations that were described to us where they'll steal one vehicle and then that vehicle is used for subsequent crimes or the theft of more vehicles. So the goal of this, I think, was if you're able to arrest, one of the individuals, then the punishment can potentially you can pull the other individuals into the case. The other change that occurred there was pretrial release. And this was just, I think, increasing the stipulations for an individual who's arrested for auto theft that has a history of recent crimes, to not be held until such time that they're charged. We did hear a couple of examples from just in our conversations and in our research where individuals that had potentially stolen, again, 5, 6, 7 vehicles in the past several years, either arriving to a court date in a stolen vehicle or leaving a court date and subsequently stealing a vehicle outside of the location, being arrested and being returned. So you're always going to have some of those people that are going to keep coming back for more. So I think this was essentially designed just to prevent that. I mean, and in, I suppose, a roundabout way, save them the trouble of adding another offense on top of what they were already at the courthouse for. All right, now getting into opportunities and next steps. I think as the report and presentation showed, and as Sarah, I think, covered in some of the resourcing as far as staffing goes, MPD is an outlier as far as, like dedicated analytic and investigative resources. There's one officer who's specifically assigned to auto theft. The bait car is a really important piece, and so that's important work that's worth doing, but it's still just one officer that's dedicated. There are a number of other areas within MPD or the city that, that can contribute and support this work as well, but their scope of responsibility is significantly bigger. So I believe there's 2 to 3. And the property crime investigation was one of the examples where there's, again, 3 to 4 total per precinct, and that could be a mix of investigators, officers, and lieutenants. And then we also have, I believe they have 5 analysts and 1 data scientist in the strategic analysis group. When we were able to interact with those individuals, like when they are able to do things relating to auto theft, it's incredibly beneficial, and the work they're doing is good. It's just that that's one thing on their plate of many more things. So I think this was one of the biggest things that jumped out, is just the way that resources are being allocated. Understanding that there's issues with staffing, law enforcement nationwide. We did ask a number of the people that we talked to about if they've seen any trends as far as the dynamic between sworn and civilian hiring. It does seem like from the analytics side, we're seeing a lot more civilians. Seeing that civilian hiring on the actual investigative side is something that's still newer. I think recently, actually, I believe MPD in their budget presentation spoke about some of the changes that are happening with actually having investigators that are civilian within MPD. So there's potentially an opportunity for that to be something they explore in the event that that there aren't the resources to bring in sworn officers to do that work. The other one to note too, I'm not completely sure how many people they had, but with the forensic group, the grant covered just overtime for them, which led me to believe that that's probably another area that's worth exploring if we're having to specifically fund overtime for that group just focused on auto theft. Again, once a vehicle's recovered, it's a lot of work to print dust a vehicle and do everything required to figure out who was driving, to the point that you would need in order to bring a case forward. So. Looking at equipment, again, as far as the traditional equipment, some of the things that I covered earlier, MPD employs the Stop Sticks Patrol Terminator. That essentially mirrored what we saw across a lot of other departments, is going to that kind of single handheld device that's utilized. I think the reason for that is that moving away from the Stop Sticks and Stinger devices, just as far, the danger that they pose to the officers themselves as well as residents is a good thing. The bait car program, again, I put it on here, again, it's not necessarily an opportunity because we already have it, but I think, considering possibly expanding it, it still is very unique to Minneapolis, but it does seem like the rate of return on it is fairly good, so it's something that the potential, is there for looking at what it would take to expand that program. MPD squads recently received upgraded technology to include the ALPRs, so the automated license plate readers. That statistic I had mentioned earlier about 405 cars being flagged by a single vehicle in under 2 years. Extrapolate that out to every squad that's out driving around when they turn them on, and I would imagine that they'll be identifying a lot more vehicles. Again, this is one where I think there's a number of different avenues that could be pursued. Obviously, with any surveillance technology, you want to be very deliberate about the data governance side of things and how this information is utilized, tracked, how it's available, who has it. But also, I think another place where it's going to there's going to be discussion needed is on, the training on all of that, but then also on the policy of it. If we're utilizing the technology, if an officer is driving down the street and pings a vehicle that's stolen, what does happen next? Right now, in the city, if they are able to initiate a chase under their policy, I believe that the only real outcomes that are, as far as what's authorized, are that the vehicle leaves the city jurisdiction, the city limits. The vehicle, individual pulls over and decides that they're done running, which again, just based on the geographic size of the city, I don't think that happens with, a lot of regularity, but I could be wrong. Or the other option is that the individual crashes. So, again, I think there's a couple of options there that aren't that likely, and then there's one that hopefully isn't that likely, but it's not a great outcome. And so I think that's something where if there's the possibility that there will be more vehicles identified that could result in chases, that's a very logical area to figure out, okay, well, what do we do now? And then looking at the diversion programs, this is one where, again, I don't think the entire scope of this falls within the city. There's other partners that I think we would have to be engaged with as far as Hennepin County Sheriff, Hennepin County Attorney's Office, but you can see that, there are other places where this is working. And so, to the extent that those discussions aren't happening is probably something that's worth exploring, following this presentation. I think with the arrests, you see so much of it, and I know that you all have heard kind of the same refrain from MPD, which, I do understand. It's, when there's limited resources or very selective about how they're deployed. So many of these diversion programs are based around misdemeanor arrests. In the event that misdemeanor arrests aren't being made, there isn't diversion happening. And so essentially we've kind of, that means that there's a segment of the youth population that are sort of being left to their own devices. And then, and will continue to offend until eventually they commit, an offense that's high enough that they enter our justice system and diversion's no longer on the table. So for those and many more reasons, it's probably something that I think is worth more conversation. As far as next steps, and this is one I wanted to make sure we noted this, the city auditor's policy and research division will continue to serve as a resource for council on this topic. Again, as far as what this can look like, it's anything from responding to any additional questions that you or your colleagues may have following our presentation, participation or facilitation on discussions across multiple parties, or working with executive staff in support of more detailed exploration or proposals of adopting new policies, programs, or equipment. With that, that concludes our presentation, and I'm more than happy to respond to any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Is there any discussion? Well, I want to thank you for the presentation, and Councilmember Koski, do you want to add anything?
I'll just note here, thank you, Chair Vita, and I just want to say thank you so much. There's just a lot of information to kind of download here, so I am sure I will be in touch with some future questions, but I just really appreciate the swift turnaround on this as well. So thank you to your team.
Thank you, and I see Councilmember Palmisano has questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a few questions, and I also am still digesting all of this information. But generally speaking, I guess after this presentation, I'd say I'm glad that Mayor Fry is proposing 16 new civilian positions in MPD that are not specifically part of the implementation unit. I know that seven of those are analysts. They are not auto theft analysts, like in your comparison here, but still, I would like to think, and maybe we could explore as a council, how that might help. I think it's important to highlight that it seems from this presentation that the number one method of getting folks into these programs is via arrests, and I'm not sure how we feel about such a thing. It seems like having social workers doing outreach on this is not having the same kind of impact as it does in Ramsey County. And I know in conversations through MN Heals, which I have continued to be a part of, and I hope that as Commissioner Barnett comes on board, that he will choose to be more involved in that when we are able to offer these programs to the parents or guardians of young people, the same kinds of diversion programs that Ramsey County is offering through arrest of individuals, that these young people's parents and guardians 100% want these programs. They absolutely want these kinds of mental health assistance, chemical addiction assistance kinds of programs for the young people that are doing these kinds of things. But arrests are down in Minneapolis, and so are referrals. In comparison, what strikes me about this is that Ramsey County, and specifically the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office, has this go team of people that are just doing this. And my limited understanding from St. Paul Police is that they're not really involved in this kind of a program, that this is its own sort of swing unit. But I am curious, in this diversion program, you talk about the restorative justice end, or rather Ms. Renner spoke about the restorative justice end, and said that if individuals are successful in completing the diversion program, then they don't have an arrest on their record. But if they don't successfully complete the diversion program, does it actually result in anything else happening? Do we know? I mean, I have to say, because a lot of this is about young people and diversion, it is really hard to get this information. So I really applaud your work on all of this. But do we know in Ramsey County, if a youth doesn't complete the diversion program, does anything actually happen?
As far as actual outcomes, I don't know if we've tracked any of like the specific itemized data, but the way that it's, everything is laid out in those programs is in the individual that a youth fails to uphold whatever the, the contract agreement was. It's almost, I don't want to necessarily keep using legal terms, but it's like a plea agreement, where if in the event that they don't complete it, they basically re-enter the legal process. So if there were charges that were stayed for, in like completing this agreement, like then they'll basically start that process back over again. I don't know what that looks like in terms of how often it happens, but it seems like it's essentially just start back from day one. So the idea is that it's an intervention at that front end.
The other big difference between maybe Hennepin County versus Ramsey County is this is an agreement with this GO team, with the sheriff's flock of cops to go and arrest everybody, when we know, at least we know in Hennepin County, that we would never be able to bring charges on, assuming there's 4 individuals in a car, 3 of those individuals, only the driver is ever going to actually be able to get charged here. So in Hennepin County, my understanding, could be wrong, is that only the driver could ever actually get charged with this. But in Ramsey County, in contrast, they're just going to charge every kid in that car, every young person in that car, knowing that only the driver would ever stick anyway, and that is their route to get people into these programs. And it looks like it's a fairly successful route into these programs, but I think we want to be clear about how we might try to proceed and do things, because I'm not sure we want to do it that way.
Yeah, Council Vice President Paul Massano, Chair Vita, members of the committee, you're completely right. It does seem, again, it's fairly heavy-handed, and I think that has been the approach they've taken, where we're just going to come down on everything and hope that that's enough of a deterrent. I do think that with some of these restorative programs, one of the opportunities they do have is it's incredibly hard to charge the individuals that might just be passengers in the vehicle.
Right.
We talked to a number of, I was really hoping I could find like some actual, like hard data that I could bring back. So it's just going to be anecdotal at this point, but some of the individuals we talked to did note that oftentimes a number of the individuals that are found riding in the vehicles, if they are booked and identified and they can track them, it's a matter of time before they themselves are then picked up as the driver of a stolen vehicle. So I think that would be another place, and it would be voluntary because they're not being charged, where the intervention piece might be very beneficial. If you have 3 other people that are in the vehicle, you can't necessarily book them, but they're again like an accessory to whatever's taken place, and so that might be an opportunity to offer some kind of services that would hopefully take them down a different path and give them that opportunity to avoid recidivism. So I do think there's lots of opportunities there. We did hear the Ramsey County, there's not, I don't think, that extensive relationship with SBPD, but they did work, and they're going to a conference soon with them. It's the St. Paul's equivalent of, and I know we just kept changing names of things here, but the Office of Violence Prevention. Who is kind of trying to spearhead some of that stuff from the St. Paul side and very involved. So I think that, again, outside of the MPD itself or even Hennepin County Attorney's office, I think we do have a number of tools here that are being used for other things that we might want to consider the role that they could play in a lot of these processes. And I think the diversion with youth is definitely one of them, because it's something where if we see a buildup from auto theft to then those being used for additional, like committing of additional crimes, it's an upward trend. And so intervening on the front end of that seems like everybody has a fairly vested interest.
Right. Thank you. And thank you for this work. I know it's probably not easy to try to come up with an apples-to-apples comparison. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Happy to do so.
Thank you, and thank you so much again for the presentation. I'm sure council members will follow up with any additional questions. A lot of information. So thank you so much, and seeing no further business before us, I will declare this meeting adjourned.